Are carbs the enemy? Well, yes and no. Let's talk a little bit about carbohydrates and carbs as such, and why we all seem to have a little bit of a problem with carbs. Now, carbohydrates are a fuel source that our body actually needs to be able to function and move and do things like exercise and day-to-day activities. Without carbohydrates, we would very, very quickly, and you'll know this if you've ever went on a low-carb diet or cut carbohydrates out of your diet, you will suffer massive dips in energy, most likely. You will be very moody and ratty. You will crave more sugary things, most likely, when you severely cut carbohydrate out of your life. For most people, carbohydrates should probably be limited a little bit or restricted in some way, because we are in an obesity epidemic. We're in an epidemic of fat, sick, and unhealthy people. Now, are carbs to blame? Again, yes and no. For the majority of people, they can over-consume carbohydrates. Like, let's put it into perspective. When was the last time you ate 3 chicken breasts in a row? You probably didn't. When was the last time you ate 3 bananas in a row? You probably haven't. Yes, although bananas are carb, it's a highly fibrous and nutritious source of natural carbohydrate when compared to the chocolate bar, the bag of crisps, the packet of Haribo, Doritos, the dip, the little snacks of the chocolate, whatever. You can eat a lot over and over and over again, can't you? In massive quantities. Why is that? Well, what happens when we eat carbohydrate? It makes us feel good, number one. But number two is that we use it for energy either immediately, or it gets stored as glycogen, which is stored fuel for our muscles in our body to be able to operate and function, yes? If we were to consider it this way, when I talk about carbohydrate consumption, let me show you my art skills right now. Hopefully you can work out what that is on the screen. It's a person with their esophagus, and here is examples of food going into it. Let's consider this. You consume carbohydrate, it gets stored. Let's consider that it gets stored in a tank, though that is metaphorical for just being stored in the liver and the body. This tank, actually, your body's capacity has a storage capacity, if you will, of around approximately, for an average male, 500 grams. So let's consider that of carbohydrate. Now, what does this mean? It means that this tank can be filled with approximately 500 grams of carbohydrate before it overspills. So what does that mean? Well, that means once you consume more than 500 grams, unless you are exercising intensely or very, very active, and you overspill in this tank, the likelihood is that it's going to get stored as fat tissue. Now, obviously, overall calories count in this, but when it comes to carbohydrates, we don't realize the effect that too much can have on us and our ability to store fat. So carbohydrates are needed. If you consider this tank, it's constantly dripping, right? And what it's doing is feeding the muscles to move. Like right now, my body is using that energy to move my arms and work my body and just operate, right? So it's constantly fueling your muscles. How much of that is getting used is often overestimated. Hence why we are fat, we are sick, and we are tired. We are more overweight and carry more excess body fat, because what most people are doing is they're filling themselves up through carbohydrates, and they're filling this tank to an overspill all the time. Now, an easy way to give an example of this is letting you in on some facts of how much grams of carbohydrate is in certain foods, and how one of the main contributors to gaining weight and obviously to being out of shape is snacking, which is a thing that a lot of people struggle with. So, for example, things like 2 slices of bread, you're talking 30 grams of carbohydrates. A medium potato, 30 grams of carbohydrates. A 100-gram large portion of broccoli, 7 grams of carbohydrates. What if we were to talk about cabbage? Around 6 grams per 100 grams of carbohydrates. But if we were to compare that to things like chocolate, let's take 1 packet of Cadbury's Dairy Milk Buttons, 75 grams of carbohydrates. 1 packet of Haribo Star Mix, 120 grams of carbohydrates. 1 packet of McVitie's chocolate hobnobs, 160 grams of carbohydrate. Now, if you were to just total up what I've said there, you would be getting almost the full capacity of 500 grams of carbohydrate from just bread, a couple of slices, 1 medium potato, a little bit vegetables, but a small amount of sweet chocolate and biscuits. Because I know many of you watching this could consume a full packet of hobnobs, or a full packet of Dairy Milk Buttons, or a full packet of Star Mix possibly even in one go. So this goes to show how easy it can be to overconsume carbohydrates and thus calories, and for it to be detrimental to you staying in shape and staying in good health. To make your life simpler, consider when you consume carbohydrates, which is the food that most people are hooked on. Snacking, it's easy, it tastes good, it lasts long, you can store it, it's cheap. You know, all those things make it available and for us to want it. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, the carbohydrates that we consume, unless they're single ingredient carbohydrates like fruits and vegetables, they often have chemicals in which affect the brain to say, I want more, give me more, this is pleasurable. And food marketers know this, so they can add those chemicals in to affect your brain to say, this is nice, give me more, I will pay to buy more, and then they have a continuing customer. So how many carbs should you be having per day? Now again, this depends. It depends on the person's BMR, the basic metabolic rate, how many calories they burn at rest. If they're a naturally lean person, they might have a high tolerance for carbohydrate. Whereas if somebody gains weight quite easily and they have a sedentary job, for example, their carbohydrate allowance should probably be quite low. As an estimation, as a guideline, between 45 to 60% of your total calories should be carbohydrate. But again, this is dependent on your activity levels, your age, your weight, your height, all the rest of this stuff. If you are a marathon runner, you're probably going to need 80 to 90% of your calories from carbs because you need the extra energy. But if you sit at a desk all day, or you drive a car or a van, and you don't do much activity, then you're likely to be on the much lower end of needing carbohydrate because your body doesn't need as much fuel because it doesn't operate as like somebody who says very active would. To put an example, if your average was 2,000 calories a day, then you would be looking at around sort of 800 to 1,300 calories from carbohydrates as a ballpark figure. Now these videos are here to educate you, to give you a little bit of an idea. I want to try and break down the science and to make this whole thing of getting into a healthy lifestyle simple and manageable for you. And so you can take this with you and use it. Again, it's not the be all and end all. We can get roped up in far too much into macro this and percentage that and science this and fact that, and my mate did this and I heard this off this doctor and this YouTube person said that and my GP said that. The facts remain the facts, however. And if you consider it, if what you're doing now is not working, then take this information and use it to something, to a place that could be useful for you. Use this information to take what you will from it and adopt a healthier way of living. I hope this is helpful, useful, and valuable for you today. Comment below, share this with whoever needs to see it. Click the subscribe button on wherever you're watching this, and I'll see you on the next one. If you'd like to learn how to create outstanding levels of energy, motivation, and self-control, my second book, Supercharged, the modern day guide to doing exactly that, is out now.